for coming in this morning for our little tete-a-tete fireside chat. Um, I suppose really now that you're going to be retiring at the end of this month, I really wanted to, I suppose, capture some of the I suppose the major inputs and contributions that you made to ATU over the years. So really, I suppose I would just want to kind of maybe spend 30 minutes of your time, if you don't mind, today, and I suppose just kind of get a flavour of what you've been doing here in Galway in ATU and how it's helped and added value to the region. So I suppose really to kick off, you've been central to shaping the innovation enterprise at ATU and in the iHubs in particular. And as we look back on your journey, the people and the legacy today, I suppose really just in terms of the journey itself, what would you say would be the biggest transformation during your time here leading in enterprise and innovation at ATU?
Yeah, thanks, Turlock. Look, it's good to look back, I suppose, after over the 20 years. It's hard to believe it's come to retirement. But yeah, look, when I started actually in 2004, there was the building, the original building was just being built, if you like. It wasn't finished and handed over to me, if you like, until 2005. And GMIT at the time, it had no history of business innovation centres. So it was a total greenfield operation starting from scratch. We got the first client or two in, and the building was actually filled from roughly end of 2006 onwards. But I suppose some of the things we did, which were very important at the beginning, is that we decided from the get-go that we'd be quite strict on who we let in, and that we'd have a screening process, and that the clients we were bringing in would have to meet certain criteria. In other words, they'd have to be using some type of technology or innovation, that have to be able to create jobs, that have to have an export potential really from day one, and they'd have to generate a revenue. And a lot of that, dovetailed with the Enterprise Ireland criteria. But also, I was very key on research, that, the companies, it's going to be quite difficult to develop startups that can compete globally if we're not plugging in very good research integration. So that was, key from my point of view with all the companies we met in the beginning. So then we, in the early days, it was quite challenging because we had to build networks with GMIT. It was all new to everybody, new to the staff, new to the lecturers, new to the researchers. But that's what we did in the first phase, is built that network and got it up and running.
The Innovation in Business Centre, I think, was the brand at the time that you had. And you did a rebrand then later on to the iHub. So I suppose it's quite an iconic brand, the iHub. But what if just go looking back on that, what was the thing that drove that change to do that rebranding, and how did that help, I suppose, cement the centre in the landscape in the region?
Yes, like it was very interesting because at the start, would you believe the original name that was on the original facility was Industry Support Centre. And that was the actual name, the title that was used in the funding applications to EI at the time, way back. But I suppose, look, I felt, Industry Support Centre was an older name. It had older connotations, I suppose. So very soon, when we appointed the advisory board of that, we tried to get a newer name, a fresher name, a more modern name. And that in itself was quite challenging because you have so many different people sitting around the table. But I agreed a sort of a middle ground at the time, which was Innovation in Business Centre, because that's all we could get at the time. But it allowed us to do some brochures, get it off the ground. It was a reasonable name, not a brilliant name, but we worked with that for a couple of years. And then when the extension was 7 or 8 years old, I mean, very quickly we realized that it wasn't going to pay for itself because it was just physically too small with the footprint. And I wanted to create a much more bigger, innovative, creative brand. We got some external companies here locally involved. I think you were involved with me way back at the time. we got we put a lot of thought and a lot of thinking into it, and I was delighted what we came up with, the final result, which was, you know, iHubs, and you could have iHub for Galway, and obviously we could have iHub for Mayo. And I was particularly pleased as well with the colourful, you know, the colours that were in it, and the fact that we had Oscuelige, we had Galway and Mayo Oscuelige at the bottom of our logo right from the very beginning. And I wanted to bring in that because, you know, we deal with Údarás clients as well, and I wanted to keep that as part of it. So that helped to really reposition the iHub completely within the context of startups at a national level.
But yeah, the Hubs moniker seems to be really been taken up and used throughout the country as well. You hear digital hubs, and there's connected hubs that the Western Development Commission, like the Connected Hubs brand as well. So really fits nicely into that, I suppose, brand portfolio, you know, which it also sits nicely with the ATU logo as well.
Yes.
I suppose that would have been, at the time, those changes would have been certain types of milestones, you know, and at the time, I suppose the centre then would have been, you were there a few years and you had companies and they were starting to scale and grow themselves. So you would have started seeing some milestones or maybe some, I suppose, successes really, you know, at that stage. And, you know, the Galway extension that you put on then later, I suppose that in itself was a major milestone. And how did that development open up new opportunities for startup and also for research with ATU?
Yeah, I mean, look, the extension at the time was, Jesus, it was a major project, you know. The reason we had to do it was because the original building, the footprint was too small, the revenue it generated, you know, so we had a loss going forward every year, and that was very, you know, kindly taken up with GMIT at the time. So we were successful, like at the original building level. After a number of years, we got out there, we had software companies, medical companies, but we didn't have proper facilities. We didn't have proper R&D units in that. So over a period of about a year, I suppose, we put together a very significant business plan for Enterprise Ireland. There was an open call for, I think I remember, campus incubation extension facilities at the time. And I think there was 9 applications, and 3 of us, you know, got funding out of the 9. And I was delighted that we got the maximum amount of money, which at the time was €3 million, and indeed GMIT since ATU put up, you know, another 1.5 million as well into what you see here today. But what it did for us though, Darlock, was it doubled the capacity. So on the day the building was handed over, we had, you know, an extra sort of 20 incubation units, and those units were R&D units among them, which had proper, you know, facilities for R&D labs, and that was really key. Also, we had larger units, and we had critical things like the event space. So we put a lot of work into the design, the development of the building. We visited a lot of, I suppose, what you might deem best-in-class facilities in Ireland at the time. We worked very closely with David Lee and Buildings and Estates and Cahill. They were brilliant at the time, and indeed Karina for all the furniture and the kit out. And yeah, it you know, look, when it was built, it meant that we could grow companies to a much bigger level. So, for instance, you know, nowadays we have medical device companies in particular growing to 15, 20 staff, where they're taking 3 units. And that's the equivalent of small SMEs, you know, in the region in Ireland. And we're very proud of that. And, you know, we have a lot of results. So, look, I mean, we're way over 300 million in investment funding raised by the clients. I suppose we're well over 1,700 new jobs supported. You know, there's a whole load of other funding supports. I suppose the acquisitions were a key thing for me as well. At the time, we had 8 acquisitions, and we've almost 60 high growth startups. So one of the things that I was particularly pleased about in the recent years was the 12 DTIFs, because, you know, they were got by clients in the building at the time, which was very significant, generated, I think something like 47 million in investment funding. But critically, 4 of them were with the Met Centre, and they were the RPO, and I was always keen on that from day one.
Really, like, yeah, that's, I suppose, from a lot of small acorns, you got a lot of mighty oaks. And I suppose really in terms of the centres themselves, the footprint of the centre, they're like amazing, just statistics, KPIs that you mentioned some of those there. I suppose just looking, going inside the fabric of the building, for those companies to scale and grow, and for those companies to be bought out, there would have been a lot of work that was happening inside the actual building itself. And I think a lot of times when people pass the building, they don't realize the hive of activity that's going on inside the actual building itself. And I suppose, that the iHubs themselves are almost an ecosystem onto themselves. And I suppose really just to kind of get an insight of that, like what role did the people and staff to entrepreneurs, like how did that help in shaping that type of entrepreneurial culture within the iHub itself and ATU?
Yeah, I mean, look, these are key areas. Like, I suppose that started way back with the extension, because in the original discussion of the new building, there was talk of a separate building. And I didn't like that, because I wanted one big team. I wanted everybody to work together. I knew we could create a vision of the future, which would have a lot of entrepreneurs all mingling together with the new building and the original building. So that's what we did. Now, there was a lot more pain in the development of that, because you had to integrate the new extension at 3 levels, and we had a lot of challenges with, Kangos and stuff, and we still kept the original building going. But I must say the new building gave us the opportunity for, a complete entrepreneur pathway. So we, as you know, run a lot of programs, particularly the New Frontiers, the Empower program with Maria, very successful in Mayo. And also those participants reside in the building. And we've had several cases of those where they have integrated, took units afterwards. And like that pathway is very important, because people could move forward, access, the vouchers, access the funding, become part of the network, and become part of the wider ecosystem. And I suppose what helped us to drive on that at the time was our new events area. Because in the original hub, we didn't have any space really. We had a canteen only. So I was adamant that we wanted our own dedicated space. And as you know, you're key there, we run monthly events. We run a big event at Christmas and at summer. And that's very, very important. And I suppose the other thing that's important is that when we're bringing in new clients, we do a lot of work on the ground with a good induction for them. We connect them with all the other clients in the building. But not alone that, we connect them with the research people. We physically, hold those meetings, do those networking. And I suppose coffee, Turlock, is very important in that whole landscape.
That's true, yeah. The water cooler conversations are right, and the caffeine kind of fuels the hub itself. And it's great to see, I suppose, the real measure of the impact is always seen in the companies and people who come through the actual centre itself. And I know you love all your client companies equally, but I'm sure there has to be 1 or 2 standouts, or spin-out successes that like really stand out to you, So maybe, but I would actually, if there's 1 or 2, maybe you would like to talk about, just to kind of, I suppose, for people that mightn't be familiar with the iHub, just to give a flavour of the different types of companies and some of the success stories you've seen and witnessed over the years.
Yeah, look, I mean, we had a huge amount of successes over the years, thankfully, and we were supported very well on that, always by Enterprise Ireland and by GMIT and ATU. I suppose at a program level, first of all, the New Frontiers with Tony was hugely successful. And the whole reason of a New Frontiers is to form a pipeline for HPSUs and startups that can export and compete globally. So people like Truck Science, Citadel, Chipwright, CGA Technology, One Touch Health, BioWave, even Rockfield Medical came, originally way back through the New Frontiers route. And that helped create companies in the programs that came in, grew within the hub over a number of years. But critically, we were always focused on results from day one. And we were after new jobs, exports and revenues. And that's what these companies could do. I suppose if you look then at other areas, like we've had a whole load of acquisitions, I suppose it's worth mentioning them. We've had 8. I mean, there was five, I think, medtech, and there was, I think, 3 on digital tech and software. But I mean, look, it's the likes of Novate Medical, Varian, Uravi, Claddon Medical, and Nortev. I mean, they were all acquired. I suppose which shows us at an external international level that, there is something happening there. And a lot of those companies had, key integration of research and support from ATU. So, I mean, I don't want to forget some of the alumni, but we had great alumni that were with us one time, and indeed the likes of Kaizen Tree and Blue Drop Medical, Cran Med, Smart Reactors. I mean, they were all companies that were with us and did their 4 or 5 years, and they're out there in the region. And then look at the current clients. We've some really super excellent current clients. I've no doubt there'll be another acquisition or two from some of them over the years, the likes of, Origin, Invera, Tymphany and Simsys, and look at Nua Surgical, La Nua Medical, Endowave. Like there's loads, Ronspot, Conry, Precision Sports and Isovac. And I suppose when I look back over it, without picking out any one company, one thing that really gave me great pride was when Rockfield a couple of years ago got FDA approval while they were still in the incubator. I mean, that was a first. I mean, that hasn't happened since. I doubt it has happened in many incubators in Ireland. And that was hugely successful. The other thing that really I was pleased about was the amount of DTIFs we got. We worked hard at that, very hard. We brought in external people. We worked closely with EI. We helped the knowledge spread within the building. And I suppose every time a company would get, first in human trials, and we'd sit with them and do the reviews, Jesus, they were good days as well. Once the results are good, they're on the right track. And I suppose even smaller things, I won't say, in a KPI, but I mean, even the day we won the Sustainability Award with the Galway Chamber and Shannon Airport, and I know yourself, you were key in helping me with that. I was really pleased with that too, because it gave a recognition for ATU and for our new building. And we did take into account a lot of environmental and sustainability criteria. So, yeah.
That's good, yeah. And you forgot the European Innovation Accelerator funding as well. I think we've had 6 companies that were awarded.
Yeah, exactly.
As well, which is great. And not like you to forget 1 or 2 companies, but I suppose just looking beyond the individual companies itself, you mentioned like when the companies come in, they might start off as as startups, and they get some funding, and then they become a HPSU, and they go on to get other funding, and they scale and grow. But eventually they do leave the centre itself. And I suppose that has had an impact as well, just on the wider region, just locally here in Galway, but also in the wider region with the other hubs that we have as well in Sligo and in Donegal. I suppose, really, if you want to maybe reflect a little bit on that in terms of that impact.
Yeah, like you have to remember, back when the original building was built, there was a certain amount of activity, in Galway, in the region, in relation to startups and supports. But I felt that there was a huge pull for several years to the East Coast, and they were getting a lot of the funding, a lot of the clients and companies. And I even had entrepreneurs who were returning from abroad coming in to me when I'd meet them saying, oh, we can't do our startup in Galway, we have to go to Dublin. And thankfully I was able to convince most of them to stay with us and to come in. So that was the context at the time. Now, I think, the iHubs and ATU helped to really transform Galway, and particularly with the extension. I think we increased dramatically, the level of research on medtech front, particularly with the Med Centre, and now more recently with the Medical Imaging Suite. I think, the iHubs played a key role as part of the wider ecosystem, with the Portashed, Platform 94, University of Galway, every one of us working together to try and build up the region. And I was delighted to see a lot of our successful New Frontiers clients would go on to the NDRC program and were successful, and a lot of them won categories there. And indeed, our clients, when our clients would, leave the building because we had certain criteria, we didn't leave them in forever. We have a number of clients, I'm delighted to say, in Platform 94, and that's good. And we've a huge number in Parkmore and Merview and out in Ordenmore and Clare Galway Corporate Park. So look, I mean, it has been very significant for the region, and I suppose what I think it did, what I think the IOPS did over the years was it helped to create that critical mass in Galway. It helped people to sort of sit up and say, wow, there's a lot going on here, particularly in medtech. I mean, we were massively successful, against all the odds, I suppose, from a zero base with medtech startups.
Very good, yeah. And I think there was a statistic I saw there. I think it was over something like 76% of the businesses that have come through the IHUB are still in business after 7 or 8 years. It's really a testimony to, I suppose, the selection process and maybe some of the supports that the companies got as they were here in the IHUB, and when they went out then outside of the centre itself. You touched a little bit there earlier on, and just there in your last remark, just in terms of collaboration and partnerships as well. And I suppose collaboration has always been a strong theme of the hubs. You mentioned how we work with a lot of the other incubation centres, Crew, and also I think you to mention the Bio Innovator Campus as well out in Athenry and Skull there as well, and the other incubation centres that you mentioned there. We've done a lot of interaction and collaboration with them, and also I suppose with some of the bigger other players, the Western Development Commission, the Ross and Westbic and stuff like that. And we've helped, I suppose, links people with ideas and also with the institute as well. But like collaboration, I think is always been a kind of a central rung of the iHub itself. And I'm just wondering, can you share an example of maybe a particular research partnership that illustrates this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's collaboration, is interesting and it's very important. But when you're starting from nothing and you're starting from zero, it takes quite a while to build it up. I mean, for me, there's a few areas like that I was very key on. The vision from the very beginning was that, we'd have to have startups that had research plugged into them. Otherwise, I felt they couldn't compete globally. And that's what we were trying to do from day one. So the research that we did and, the collaboration with the staff and the researchers, it just didn't happen overnight. And it was, quite challenging at times. And the original G MedTech Centre, which is now the Med Centre, was transformative. And I remember going in there early on when I had come to GMIT at the time and looking around at what they were doing. And geez, I was blown away with the capability and the expertise that was there and the vision and the potential. So, yeah, I'm delighted to say that we collaborated really, really well with them. And that, helped to build the expertise and competence for the clients we had, helped them to leverage the money and the funding. So that was one area. And I mean, that was hugely important, like you mentioned there, the fast track to innovation, the European Innovation Council, the DTIFs. None of them would be possible, without some of this funding and research. But the other key area that I was very focused on from the beginning were the students and the graduates and the placements. And like we developed them over a number of years. I got to know, I suppose, the heads of departments, the heads of schools, got to know particular people, particularly in engineering, science, business. Got some, students over initially to work with the clients. Like, it's a huge benefit to the client companies, and not everybody realized that at the time, or indeed even now, but huge. So we collaborated very well there with a lot of departments and schools. And I remember even when you came on, you helped me with that. But I remember some years we'd have up to 40 students from GMIT, ATU, working across both Galway, Mayo, and some of the programs. And there was one in particular that stuck in my mind. I mean, there was a few, but there was one that started off with Nortev years ago. A young man from the science and chemical engineering degree came in for a student project and worked with Nortev. And he continued when the project finished and he did his degree. He continued working with them, I think, for a short while, even without pay, because sometimes the money wasn't there. Then he got a short contract. And I'm delighted to say that that young man, Matt Walsh is his name. I hope he hears this, because we're very proud of him. But that man went into very senior operations roles, export manager role, and is now the general manager of Nortev, who were subsequently taken over and is still the general manager. And he never worked anywhere else. And that all happened through a student project. And there was another lady who came from, I remember she came from the master's degree in business, Anne-Marie Slevin, and she got an operations manager role over a period of time with Trade Cert. So look, I mean, we had 20 or 30 cases like that where they got full-time positions. And to me, I was very proud of that, because that's what it's all about. And finally, you couldn't talk about collaboration without talking about Enterprise Ireland and the support groups and the IDA, but also the venture capital people and, everybody in the region that helped us and the people we bring into our events. Like, it's a community, and you need all these, you need a portfolio of service providers. And I suppose over the years, we spent a lot of time building up those, and that's what has helped us to, I suppose, collaborate and achieve some of the results.
Great, that's really good, yeah. And like you mentioned the gateway there, the Met Centre as well, like not forgetting the gateway in Sligo as well, PAIM and also Wiser in Donegal as well. That's been very instrumental for companies here, particularly if there's any kind of connected health devices or IoT or wearable devices as well, and on the manufacturing side as well there with PAIM. And some of the companies I remember as well at the start come in and they would have started off even just with innovation vouchers, and they might have went on to doing an innovation partnership. This is before the time the DTIPs and the EIC funding as well. So not to omit that as well. I think it's
Yeah.
we highlight that as well in the conversation. And like we talked a little bit about the national level, but there's also been some international partnerships as well in building the high hubs reputation. I know, but recently there was a partnership agreement signed with a university in Chicago. I want to maybe talk a little bit about that and where you see the iHub going internationally.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we wanted to collaborate and build partnerships on an international level. It's quite challenging when, we were never top heavy with resources in GMIT and ATU. I mean, that's the reality. Certainly the extension helped because we had more income and the pressure was off and we were able to break even. So that gave us a little bit of leeway to sort of look abroad, I suppose. And yeah, I'd be particularly proud of two things. One is, as you mentioned, the collaboration with the University of Illinois in Chicago, where we're working on very significant technology transfer projects with them in the broad urology space. We were out there earlier this year, and it followed up on some meetings we had in 2024. They do some really interesting stuff there from idea generation. And we felt we could add value to that and build upon what they were doing. And essentially that's what the memorandum of agreement will do into the future. So that's a multi-year project. I think we will only touch the iceberg on it at the moment. But I think what you could see is very interesting technology that they have over there in the university being commercialized with the help of ATU over quite a number of years in different areas for multiple products to be able to compete internationally and globally. The other one I'd say, Turlough, that I'm delighted with as well was the more recent one with LifeTech Global and Resolution Medical, where we met them. Again, it takes a long time to build these. I suppose 2 years ago originally, it was through some of the facilities in the Med Centre. But they came over originally for some of the work that we were doing with yourself with the demo day. You might remember that. And when we really saw the capability that they had for, this unique beating heart models in both the heart and in both the lungs, and it builds upon and adds more value to what the really good work that's happening in the Met Centre. And as you know, we did a big demo day with them there. We did 3 days actually in the early part of the year. And now a lot of our clients are using it, and indeed some of the multinationals. So I see that as another collaboration. We just signed an agreement with them there recently. And of course, Orla and indeed the senior management team are always hugely supportive for these. And that's very important for us as well.
Really good. And it's great to see that. And just, I suppose, as well, like it's the start of the initial stages of process as well, where some potential startups that might be coming into the iHub in the future might be spin-out companies coming out of ATU from some of this collaborative research as well, where there's follow-on IP generated, and that IP then is commercialized. So I know we're starting to see some of that. We have one company here at the moment in the building as well, which is
yes,
the start of a pipeline hopefully here. I suppose just we covered a good bit of ground, George, and I suppose that's looking back into the past and where we are now at the present. But I suppose what I want to try and do is to close out in the conversation is do a little bit of stargazing and look into crystal ball and see what's going to happen in the future. So I suppose just reflecting on your legacy and on the future itself, like if you were to maybe reflect on your time leading out here in the Innovation Centre, like what is there any one or two things that you'd like to see as maybe a lasting legacy that you'd leave behind?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's really great, every time I drive by the building, first of all, and the building was so different to what GMIT ATU had at the time. Like, it was such a innovative facility compared to even the original building was just standard office space, and buildings and estates people worked very closely with us to achieve that, with the architect and the contractor. So critically, the building has been full since we, got the extension, and we work hard every year on, some clients exit every year and more clients come in. I think that process, has to continue. And I think, what's really critical for me is, the KPIs, the metrics. When I worked in Dublin, that's what gave us the big bucks, was the achieving those, stretch goals and metrics. So, there was nothing unusual about it for me, but for me, what was challenging was how to operate in this type of environment, which was totally different, So now that we've figured it out, and now that we have, I think, a very significant legacy there, we've opened the doors. We have a beautiful building. We have incredible facilities, and we haven't even fully tapped into, ATU has other gateways, as you mentioned, the precision engineering manufacturing in Sligo, the WISAR IoT and aerial design in Donegal, and has 4 hubs across the west and northwest. We haven't really just tapped into all that yet because it's so new. So I would love to see all that continue and integrate more, and really leverage the 100+ incubation center units that ATU has in this critical, underserved, undernourished, if you like, region, and NUTS2 region that needs this. And indeed, to leverage the funding from the state, and future money is needed to build on that, because the facilities are one thing, but it's the people on the ground that get the deliverables. So, when I'm gone, I suppose I'm looking for all that to continue. And also, I'd like the international collaborations to grow and nurture. They're only at an embryonic stage for both of them. And I think that will give us, international linkages. We have good contacts, in other places as well, internationally. But I think when you form agreements, strategic partnerships, that gives you, a lovely conduit where you can work very closely and very confidentially with those people to build something new and innovative for the future. And that's what I want to happen.
Good, yeah, no, that's I suppose that's a good roadmap mapped out there for people to to maybe continue on, take up the challenge, and continue on that actual journey itself. So George, listen, I think we're going to wrap up there. So thanks very much for your time. But I do have one other question. What's next? The iHub has been a great engine of transformation, and all the other incubation centers have been great engines of transformation for the region. But I'm just wondering, now that one of the engineers is stepping off, I just wonder what's next for you.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's never a good time to retire, I came to 65 there recently, so I said, look, that was it. I mean, you could work longer if you wanted to nowadays, but it's a challenging role. There's a lot on every day, and I've done my piece very well, I think, and I'd like to hand it over to other people now. And yeah, I'm looking for free time and basically holidays, and traveling more with Rosaline, and spending more time with the three kids, which are now adults in their own right. And doing more things. Like, there's a list at home for me, Turlock. You don't realize that, but there's a list at home that I haven't got to yet. So I'll have to start crossing off some of them. And I have my own list as well that I want to work on. So yeah, look, it's great, and I'm very thankful that I'm healthy and fit, and that we can do it. And that's the key thing. But I want you and the others that are here to keep this running successfully, and onwards and upwards.
Look, we will do our best. I don't know if we're going to be able to do as well as you, but I'm telling you, we'll give it a good go. So listen, thanks very much for your time, and I suppose really just want to wish you all the best in the future, and also for your family, and I hope you have a really happy and healthy and long retirement. So thanks for taking the time.
Great, lovely. Thanks, Turlock. Thank you.